2. Okay, we're live.
All right. Let's...
Okay, we're live. Oh, man, I have the YouTube thing open. Okay, so you want to introduce yourself, Adriene?
Sure. Hang on, I'm going to mute. Okay, I can hear everything as it is. So, hi. So, we're going to be talking, I guess the name of the talk is Stories Are Great, but do you actually need them? We're going to bring the music down a little bit so you can hear us. So we've kind of, we sort of arranged this as a little bit of a, you're going to be hearing a lot of sounds over and under our voices. So please, in the YouTube comments, just like say something. If it's, you can't hear us or can't understand us, we'll repeat, we'll turn the music up and down. Yeah. So I'm Adriene. I work primarily as an audio engineer and a sound designer. I do a lot, I comment radio from a sort of creative and arts perspective, sound art. I have a show on WFMU, as does Olivia, which she can tell you about. I do a lot of sound collage. Yeah, so I think a lot of this talk for me is kind of a way to dig into some of the parts of the sound world that I don't think you don't see as much as maybe you could in the podcasting landscape, because I think we come into podcasting from a lot of different spaces, from journalism and from non-sound things as well. So I think it's just fun to kind of highlight what's out there. And then Olivia also here. Hello, Olivia.
Yeah, so I'm Olivia. Thanks for inviting me to do this with you, Adriene. I also do radio, and I think I'm interested in how like all the different textures and pitch and like sound qualities that are within sound. And I'm just really inspired by sound art and radio art as much as music. Those are definitely my backgrounds and my passions. So I come from that lens into this. And I think the people we're highlighting today are really like inspiring new ways of listening to a story and defining what a story is.
Yeah, cool. So I guess
I'm going to turn that off because I don't know if it's too loud.
Okay. Yeah, let us know if anything's too loud. I'm also going to drop links in the comment section on YouTube for any of the pieces you're hearing, so that if you want to listen to them outside of this talk, you can do that. So what we've been listening to is that, actually, Olivia, do you want to talk about Sol Reza?
Yeah, that was Sol Reza, her piece called Rooms in Your Mind. And she had this great quote where she's an Argentinian sound artist, and she has a great quote where she says that not all stories need to be told with words, and the sounds and the breaths and the silences and rhythms really nourish our stories and transport us. So we thought she was a great person to root us in this idea of expanding what a story was. And she has some great pieces too beyond that, like great music, almost pieces, and sound art pieces. Sol Reza is her name.
Yeah, and I just put a link in the YouTube chat so you can listen to some of her stuff on anytime. So anyway, so what we've done is, for this talk, what we want to talk about is sound works, and this includes podcasts, it includes radio pieces, it includes sound art pieces, it includes sound walks, all kinds of things that sort of function in the way that a story does. And what we mean by that is that within sound, you have a lot of things that can be meditative or can be ambient, or are overtly music, like songs, anything like that. And they function in a little bit of a different way than a story would. And I think the way that I'm defining story here is something that has a kind of tension and release, that introduces characters in some way, that grounds you in some sort of a real or imagined, but still a kind of a physical space or some kind of space, and something that has a strong perspective. So that's what a lot of these pieces do. And then we've kind of divided them into a couple categories.
Yeah, we have ones where like it's traditional, where the voice is taking the lead and really changing the drama as it goes on. And then that's what we're going to start with today. And then voice kind of expanding a little bit and becoming almost more like texture within the piece and becoming part of the greater sound design. And then thinking beyond the voice, where they don't really use the voice that much at all and still manage in our way to create a story, create this tension and release, and still have perspectives and a sense of space and stuff like that just through sound. So yeah, should I start with the Hardy White?
Yeah, we can start with Hardy White. Before we do that, I just, as you listen to everything, kind of, I think, listen for what this sense of hanging on what's coming next, which is the emotional, for me anyway, the sort of emotional arc of a story is that you're hanging on what's next. You're expecting action, you're anticipating action, and it maybe follows through, maybe it doesn't. Yeah, but Hardy White, we're going to start with Hardy White, his show Miracle Nutrition. This is going to sound initially very sort of what you think of traditional radio sounding like. Yeah, so we'll start with him. Yeah, go ahead, Olivia.
Yeah, he's Southern, and so he's been described as Southern existentialist Dada. It's just a really fun show, and Hardy kind of creates his own world where he's a star, but he has all these characters, and it's almost a sermon, but he creates all these little mini plays throughout, and you're looking for meaning. He's constantly searching for meaning, but doesn't really present you with answers for anything. There's no moral to the story, I guess. So yeah, we're gonna start with him. Here, can you hear that? Is that good?
Yeah, I can hear it.
See what's on.
Okay.
Flip around.
All right.
She got spooked by the thunder and ran off. Oh, gee.
An amazing new feature, the entertainer makes him sound like an expert way of someone one finger melody.
That's over.
It's over.
You got to hit him. Not now, Angel.
I'm and who has to. Oh wait, this is good.
Yeah. Oh.
What? Oh.
It's not coming in good. I'm gonna try UHF. Hello?
Yeah, I was just wondering why there's nothing ever on.
This is a terrible time to call. You know, I'm right in the middle
every
of
time we
stuff.
go to look for
Lou, I can't hear the show. If you're going to talk, shut off the
run.
If you're going to talk,
Okay.
shut off the TV.
We're gonna have to make this.
What I was saying is, why is there nothing ever on?
Wearing a hat, a shirt, pants, and shoes. Hardy White explores the fields around his home every morning.
Not sure what I'm looking for, but pretty sure I'll recognize it when I find it.
Every once in a
So,
while, he produces
we've
a small
started-
white handkerchief
We're going
from
to
his
kind of
pocket
duck the
and
sound
wipes his
down and
nose.
see how well this works.
Life hasn't been easy.
Life hasn't been easy.
So maybe a little more
Well,
down.
that's not true. Life has been easy,
If we
but
can.
if I knew what I was
So
looking
I'll
for
speak
out
loudly
here, I
just in
think
case.
it'd be even
So
easier.
we started with
The loading
Hardy
docks of
because
Supernip are
this
a different story.
this
Here,
episode
Lou
in
Register
particular,
and
because
his
it's kind of
coworkers
about
spend long hours lifting
story
boxes and
conventions
putting
in radio
boxes
and
together.
television. He kind of starts with this parody of kind of a traditional radio documentary.
And sometimes you got to get someone's attention if a box is falling or something. So,
Yeah,
for
and
instance, we got a guy named
the way
Walter,
he uses his
but if you
voice
need his
to create
attention
all these different
quickly,
people. He has the butchy voice, which if you listen to the show, you'd know that. And then he has like his himself on TV voicing what he's hearing on TV. You have the sound of the phone to help root you, and something familiar that you're used to. And then this Lou character that he mentions, who's the star of the radio jock. So we just thought he was a great way to kind of get us started in something we already know, but it's also playing with that form a little bit.
Yeah. So as we listen to everything for the next hour-ish that this talk is going to go on, it's about listening to this development of character that people can do. So these first couple pieces, Hardy's piece, we're about to play two others that fit into this voice as drama narrative, where the voice is really centered in the piece.
Oh yeah, so up next is Janet Cardiff, and she does that. Do you want to kind of introduce her, Adriene?
Yeah. So we're going to move from Hardy, who is very much, his voice in a lot of his show is it's him doing a lot of different voices to a microphone, and there are other sounds that play into it, and he goes outside and different things, but a lot of it is it really calls to this just a radio, someone at a microphone doing a bunch of voices and doing something. So it's very, very voice centered. The next piece, though, is going to be by Janet Cardiff, who's a Canadian sound artist who does a lot of different sound works, installation pieces, a lot of sound walks. She's kind of known for using this big like binaural head to walk around, so you get this left and right effect. I actually don't know if you're going to be able to hear it through this talk, so look the piece up after the talk to like really get this sort of spatial sense of it. But I think if we can, I guess, go ahead and kind of start it, and I'll keep talking.
Okay, yeah.
But the thing to listen to, I think, with this one is this is a situation, or this is a piece where the narrative structure exists as strongly in the sonic elements as it does in the vocal elements. You could read this, or you could listen to it without her voice.
You can hear the turning of newspaper pages. People talking
it's really
softly.
Voice heavy.
But it's very voice heavy.
There's a man
so
standing
we'll listen to a
beside
few minutes
me.
of this. And,
He's looking in the crime section now. He reaches to pick up a book, opens it, leafs through a few pages, then puts it back on the shelf. He's wandering off to the right.
Is the sound okay?
Pick up the book he looked at. It's on the third shelf down. It's called Dreams of Darkness by Reginald Hill. I'm opening it to page 88. She set off back at a brisk pace, in a rutted and muddy lane about a furlong from the house. She thought she heard a sound ahead of her. She paused. She could hear nothing, but her straining eyes caught a movement in the gloom. Someone was approaching. A foot splashed in a puddle. Sometimes when you read things, it seems like you're remembering them. Close the book. Put it back to where you found it.
So that's Janet Cardiff speaking, and it's definitely like her thinking voice. And she's in the library. She establishes that. You can hear the sounds of the library. And then she's reading a book, and the book kind of becomes alive, and you hear music, you hear a scream, you hear that splash of water in the puddle. And so there's already kind of this tension between like the outside world and her world, and imagination and reality. And yeah, she's kind of, there's just like so much tension throughout, right, Adriene?
Yeah.
See the paint peeling off the ceiling? It's quite beautiful.
So I'm gonna jump ahead. The excerpt we're playing is like 14 minutes long, but I'm just gonna jump ahead to like 5 minutes. Right now she's inside.
I'm gonna go outside.
But she's about to go outside.
Try to follow the sound of my footsteps so that we can stay together. We're going to turn right onto Whitechapel High Street. Turn to the right. Past the Whitechapel Art Gallery. Past the newsstand. Killer waited an hour. The Kentucky Fried Chicken. Turn to the right. Gunthorpe Street. A man just went into the side door of the pub.
So we're kind of fading this piece out now. Again, I've put the link on YouTube. You can listen to the whole piece sometime. Well, you can listen to 15 minutes of an excerpt. The whole piece is much longer than that. But you can hear at the end where she becomes kind of a guide, where she's saying, you can follow me here, you can follow me there. This piece is very much a story. So it doesn't quite fit into these aren't stories. This one is a story, but it's also playing with the medium of sound and radio very directly. This is something that I don't think you can, that would exist the same way as a film. It wouldn't exist the same way as a book. And one of those things that I think is really unique to radio that's fun to play with, and definitely fun to play with if you're working on podcasts now, is this idea of speaking directly to the person that's listening. So she's saying, you follow me here, you follow me here, and you sort of become a character in the drama without it feeling gimmicky, right? It doesn't feel that way. It's just a language of radio, right? And I think that's really successful in this piece, and it's something we're also going to hear in the piece coming up. And that's going to be even a further sort of breaking down of the voice and the sound. What is prioritized? What is centered? So Hardy's was very centered voice. Janet, also very centered voice, but also a very centered voice, but the sound is on the same level, right? This sort of sonic world that she's built.
And her footsteps are kind of like this action, and they become your footsteps and leads into the outside world a lot. It's like a sound walk too. So
yeah. So Olivia's going to queue up our next piece from Darren Copeland. And I've also just been reminded that I can't put links in the YouTube chat. So I'm putting the names of the artists, and you'll have to Google them, and then we'll put them into the YouTube description so you can look them up later.
Yeah, so what we're going to hear now is Darren Copeland, Lapse in Perception. And he's another Canadian sound artist. And I think this one, the sounds are much more heavy in it, as Adrienne, I think she already said this, but the sounds are definitely much more present and much more abstract, and they're a little bit like intense. So we'll just let this kind of play out. But there is this idea of, he does have the voice in it, and he has different types of voices, and they kind of get more and more distorted as you listen. So this is Lapse in Perception by Darren Copeland.
Lap 1.
What do you see?
Perfect solids that are tiny particles.
Lap 2. Lap 3.
The tempo of the world fluctuates enormously. Life scattering quickly confuses your attention. The person is here, there. Eyebrows move this way and that. Arms flap about. Every detail jumps around uncontrollably. Your attention is dazzled into oblivion. By contrast, life holding to a standstill dissolves your attention. Focus on one static image, and gradually inner thoughts occupy the moment and shut out the presence of the image. If the image is of a person, and they suddenly scream, will that scream be heard? Will it be any louder than a pin falling in the stock exchange? How far into absence can you go?
No, what do you hear? Articulated sentences that are perfect nonsense.
The world around you appears surreal and illogical in its composition. Summertime breeds its own flavor of contradictions. At one moment birds chirp, one crooner sings, wind rustles, one keyboard rattles, trains bustle, and two clocks count different times. How often is logic suspended like this?
I got nervous. I don't know if they're sparking that from my outside or from the piece, but.
So I think, yeah, so the piece is still kind of going, but I'm gonna maybe talk about it a bit, I guess, while it's still going. A couple additional things in this piece are, you have this element of sequence, which we heard in Janet Cardiff and we'll definitely hear later, where we have lap 1, lap 2, lap 3, everything gets more and more distorted as you go. Sorry, I was seeing if we could hear it in the moment, but it didn't happen in the moment I was saying it. We also have this a third thing that I think to add to some of the things we've talked about already, which is tension and release we're feeling with Janet Cardiff, the character that you can do with the voice, which we heard with Hardy White and Janet Cardiff, the perspective that we heard changing a lot in the Janet Cardiff piece. This piece also has perspective change. And then we have kind of a new toolbox in the not quite story world, which is this, how you can use recognizable sounds. Where in this piece, he's using a lot of, you hear, the one that sticks out to me, and I don't know if you have a different one, Olivia, but the one that sticks out to me is these sort of children laughing. And it comes up sort of early on, and it just sounds like kids laughing for a second in the background. It comes up a little later, and they're sort of been distorted a little bit. And then a third time, and they've been distorted a lot, but you already know the sound, you know what the sound is. So what it does is sort of slowly distorting the world. So you're feeling it breaking apart. Which I think is adding a lot of tension to the space itself and to how you listen to the piece, as like, what's the next distortion? What else is going to break down? Yeah, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that one. Yeah.
And even how he starts, like the lapse, it took me a second to realize that he was saying lap 4 or lap 5 after a while. He keeps on distorting that character. I think it's all him, all his voice, but the different processing that he does on his voice really does create these different characters, or maybe layers or perspectives, ways of like engaging, or like, I don't know, with his voice. So he becomes different people. So yeah, I think like repetition, but it really uses repetition well, but it's like funky repetition.
Yeah. I mean, you anticipate more than just you would with the repetition of a beat, right? Because it's distorted repetition. So you're anticipating the new beat, but you're also anticipating the change that's going to come from that beat and what that's going to mean for the whole story that's being sort of presented to you. We're using story in a very, very, very heavy quotes on story.
Yeah.
So as we're going to kind of move from here into this voice as texture, it's kind of how we've been saying it to each other when we've been talking about this talk, but like voice that isn't centered, basically, where it's very voice heavy, and voice as in, I think it's important to mention that when we say voice, we mean like words that you can understand, not humming, not whispering, but words you understand. So the
yeah,
next
like
few pieces,
narration.
yeah, exactly. So the next couple pieces we're going to move into, and I think that Darren Copeland piece was a good way to move this direction because he really starts distorting his voice till it's very uncentered by the end of it, especially. And these are pieces where the voice is acting as sort of part of the space, part of the texture, where you can tell that the other sonic elements are being prioritized on the same level of the voice. They're not thought of as different things.
Yeah. So I'm going to start playing the next piece. Hopefully you guys can hear it.
Yeah, the next one starts a little quieter. This is a piece from Camilla Hannon, an Australian radio artist, field recordist, radio producer. It's an excerpt from a piece called Inside Outside. I'm going to talk over the beginning a little bit. This one, I think you can really think of the environment as maybe the main character in this. It's going to take almost 2 minutes for us to get to a human voice. So you kind of can get a sense of the space and sort of think of the environment as character a little bit as you listen. And I'll come in. I'm going to talk over this piece a couple times, so excuse me for doing that. I'm sorry, Camilla, if you ever listen to this, but well,
forgive us.
Forgive us.
Are you listening? 1, 2, 3.
I'm thinking of something that Marcia Langton said years ago about how white fellas do that control and containment of the wilderness, and how they only allow so much space between them and the wild natives and the creatures out there, and so they create big spaces for them to enjoy, entertain, whatever, and they choose who should be in there and what should be in there.
1, 2, 3.
So I'm going to jump in and talk over it for just a second. So we didn't hear a voice until almost 2 minutes into it, and we heard this kind of guide voice in a way, this "Are you listening? 1, 2, 3" voice, and then we hear our first person who seems to actually be in the environment, right? But we don't have that traditional, we're not being introduced to them, we're not really getting that, there's not like a story happening at all. It's one person's sort of experience and take on what's been happening. I think as you listen to this piece, and we'll hear a little bit of this in a second, the human element of it, the voices start to build on top of the environment. And it happens sort of slowly, like a little bit of a crescendo of, you hear a little bit of a person speaking here, there's a more space that you spend with the nighttime, a little bit of a person speaking here, and here, and they're in different levels of this, or I guess layers of the sound, foreground, midground, background, they're in different spaces.
And my kunga American names are Laniok and Prera. But Laniok is the name that's associated with Berry Springs. Kongarkan people call it Laniok. It's a woman's dreaming place. So it has a lot of water. So my dreaming is Rainbow Serpent, of course, because of all the water that flows through this part of the country. Yeah, there's so there's a lot of things associated with the water. There's some springs here that women can't bathe in, but women are responsible for keeping the waterways clear.
And you do sometimes have an introductory element.
We don't have fence lines,
there,
of course. So
here
we're determined by, different kind of boundaries like hills, but the water is the significant.
There's still like this element of like deep listening required, though. There's no one to really ground you, like a narrator to be like, and then she said this.
When the sounds are
so it's playing with the documentary form.
Just before and after sunset. Because up here, the kookaburras at night won't sing until the sun's gone down. But it's all
there's that guide voice again, 3, 4, 5.
2 seasons, a wet season and a dry season. But Aboriginal people have at least 6, and some language groups have 8 seasons in their calendar. And their calendar doesn't start on the 5th of May like our winter does. Their calendar starts or moves every year depending on the change in the seasons and which plants flower and which animals breed, and all of those sorts of things are indications to them about what they should do and what they can take and what they can't touch. So there's a whole network of indications to them about how to live and where to live.
We're tidal river people, so our river system has
so again, this speaking back to the environment as character and then the people that you're hearing, as this piece builds, you're having at least this moment of it changes later. You're getting more and more voices that are starting to slightly interrupt each other, right? They're slightly going on top of each other in the same way that the environmental sounds are, in the same way that the nighttime is and the park is. And it kind of builds, I think it builds a certain amount of tension in this kind of crescendo of the human character, I guess, being part of this like environmental character. And I just think it's a very successful, really amazingly composed piece. Yeah.
We have a really close connection to them. Then further south, you get into the Daly region, which is then Mullock.
Yeah, we're leaving the woodlands and we're just moving into the wetlands.
Then on the
when you see those paperbark trees and those pandanus, that's those spiky looking plants, you know you're in a wet area. In the wet season, both sides of this road get saturated in water. We only have 2 seasons up here in the top end, the wet and the dry. Yeah, this is the billabong. Yeah, this is the billabong. Half an hour, every half hour.
And then the cicadas kind of drown out the humans, at least for that little while there. And I should also say, Camilla says that this is an examination of what we keep in and what we keep out. And kind of like challenging the field recordist who is like trying to capture this perfect sound of the environment. She's almost saying like that doesn't exist. And there's a lot of tensions within the nature and the environment and how people interact with it. Should we go to the next one?
Yeah. So I know we're really just going from piece to piece to piece. Yeah. But So we're gonna keep moving then. But I think again, the things you're listening for in these, or the things we're hoping that we're kind of providing some context for, and things that you can use as someone who's like making radio or making podcasts, coming at it, are different ways of using like sound language that have already sort of existed that people already know. So I think a lot of these are things that you can feel and see when you're listening, and just being able to point them out and think about them critically helps you kind of use them. So again, we're thinking about sound and voice kind of on the same plane, elevated to the same level. We're thinking about tension building and releasing in the way that you would with stories. We're thinking about character, and character doesn't have to be human. I really think that piece, the space, the park that she's in, is very much a character. And we're thinking about also comfort with tape, being willing to play a tape for a long time, being willing to get into the sounds, and also perspectives. Those are just kind of if anybody has joined or left, those are some thoughts. Yeah, so the next piece.
Yeah, the next one is Cycles of Atrocity by Myra Al-Rahim. And it's kind of, we're listening to a bunch of archival tape, and she's kind of like piecing together a new archive. It's definitely the Bush administration and the war on Iraq and weapons of mass destruction. These things get mentioned. And I think what's great about this is how much she, like the confidence she has with the characters. Like Bush has a distinctive voice, so you kind of know it's him, and there's some, or you just know it's the state, and then she moves into sounds of police and violence, and I don't know, am I describing this well? Adrienne, do you have anything else to add?
I think we can start playing it. That's
okay,
good.
Cool.
I think for me, the thing that's in terms of how it uses sort of sound language in the toolbox is recognizing that she knows that you're going to recognize certain voices. So you don't need to introduce them in those same ways. You can play them in different ways because you know the story also. What you're going to hear, you already know the historical event. So the narrative is already in your mind, you know it. So as she goes through it and digs through it, she can really re-examine that narrative and really play with the fact that you already have some tension because you understand the story already. I think
okay, cool.
Yeah.
Imagine a rubber ball. Imagine a rubber ball bouncing. Now, the first time the ball hits the ground is the incident. And the bouncing that follows is just the echo, momentum. And I'm able to keep the momentum going for a little bit longer, that's all. Just long enough.
When we first got in there, started looking around and didn't find anything, you get that kind of sinking feeling. Time went on. I'll never forget the tip that there was crates buried, hidden in the Euphrates River. Say, maybe these are them. Sent frogmen and there was nothing there. And so I felt terrible about it. And on the other hand, those reports did point out that Saddam Hussein was very dangerous, that he had the capacity to make weapons, and I'm convinced that if he were in power today, the world would be a lot worse off. I wish we'd have found weapons of mass destruction. But I think somebody's going to look back someday and say, thank goodness the United States believed in the universality of freedom and liberated 25 million people and gave the Iraqis a chance to have their own free society.
same. Step 3 spinal. Step 7 up the on the road for 50 feet out of Henry. Say again. Stroke. Stroke 3, come on. Stroke 3, check right, break right. Stroke 3, break right. Sam right 2. Stroke 3, break right, Sam line. Stroke 3, break 4. Sam right 3, Sam no. Wait, somebody got a hit. 4 hit. Understand your hit. 4, negative bad guy squawk, negative friendly squawk. Clap 7, visual left 9. Stroke 4, status.
Just to kind of point out this piece, and you can. A lot of the sounds that you're hearing, right, you can recognize them because they exist in the world and you live in the world. So there's not added context to them. So even though you don't necessarily know 100% what's going on, although I think you probably do, I think this is one of the things that can build tension, is that recognizability of the sounds and using that language of ping-ponging back and forth.
And really using montage really well. She's like constantly like skipping ahead and like building scene through all these little scenes, so really well.
Stroke 8, line. Stop right at down. Another Sam launch, same location. Sam, stop into the target area. Stroke 8, blind. Oh, shit! North Sam launching. Stroke 3 defending. Stroke 3 still there. Left pitch. Top one to finish 6-6. Stroke 3 is still there. Stroke.
p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Doppler radar indicated thunderstorms producing heavy rain across the warned area. 1 to 3 inches of rain have already fallen. Flash flooding is expected to begin shortly.
يضع الدار هادئا فمتى يغادر الرياء بينما نطوي المدى يمضي بنا نحو الرثاء.
The natural resources of Switzerland land, which will never again fall into the hands of the U.S. imperialism. That is why I am beaten.
Well, to talk more about the situation in Venezuela, we're joined by two.
أي إذعان يجيء بسطوه نحو الوجود. هذا الوجود ثاقبا طريقه نحو العدم موغلا في التيهة يحسبه الظمآن قبل ينكشف السراب أي إذعان قبل أن يلجأ الدجى يجيء بسطوه يومض الكون بالعبث.
There's still a few more minutes left in this piece, but just for the sake of time and the fact that you can listen to it on your own in stereo, we're going to kind of pot it down. But again, I think I was listening to that too and thinking of techniques that a person that you can use if you're kind of new to editing and how to piece things together that way. I think something that I hear a lot in there is she has the sound of the handheld radio sound, right? That happens organically, or maybe it doesn't. I don't actually know if she added that in to the archival footage she has of the people speaking back and forth of the state. but she uses it again at the end when she's going over these different bits of archival tape, where she's using it as a way to like basically bookend the sound. And I think it's a really effective device for something like this, where you want to move from spot to spot to spot to spot to keep a beat, but still keep the person in the world. Yeah. I don't know, Olivia, if you had more to add.
Yeah. Well, I just think so much happens in each minute, and so each minute is a different scene. I think the piece in total is like 9 minutes, and so she really like creates, she uses minutes well to pace herself. And then I think another thing just to say about her, she wanted to really challenge the idea that history is this linear chain of events, and that there's no such thing as a past, because the things that happen in the past like deeply affect the present. So I think you can tell in how she's fast forwarding through Bush when he's speaking, and including the sounds of the fast forwarding and the clicking of pressing play. These are all like really intentional and interesting for me. I'm still like piecing it together, but
yeah. I mean, I think that's what when you take the voice and you use it this way, where it's not like a single voice centered and you have many things happening. I think it becomes a little bit of a puzzle to listen to, which is.
Sorry. Up next, we're going to hear Anna Fritz. This is Wireless Forces. And it's funny, it's kind of this very similar topic, but much more abstract from a different angle. And should I introduce it more than that or just play it?
I think, you can start playing it. Yeah. With this one too, I think that idea of people do already know what certain things are and what they sound like, and using them can really help, I think, build the space and help you create characters. This is another one where that sound is incredibly recognizable.
17023 Angels 8, expected approach time 32, approach button 15.
404 Marshall Moms 17023 Angels 8, button 15, push time 22. Number 331, altimeter 330.
Again, that radio sound is incredibly recognizable and can really easily indicate things that, the state. It, I think, can also create the sense of urgency and planning and violence in a lot of ways, depending on how it's used. But also remembering that your audience knows this sound really well. So you can use that to help attention. Listen.
7142. 404 squawk 7143.
7143.
502 squawk 7153.
Marshall 301 and 300.
Come on, buddy. I gotta do is pick up a weapon.
Here, right below you, right time now. Can you walk us onto that location, over?
2-6, Roger. I'll pop flares. We also have one individual moving. We're looking for weapons. If we see a weapon, we're going to engage.
301, Freedom Marshall, case 3 recovery, CV1 approach, expected final bearing 331, altimeter 3001. 301, Marshall 170, 24 Angels, 9er. Expected approach time 33, approach button 17, time 18.
301, Marshall 170, 24.
This one, we also have one individual, appears to be wounded.
301, read back away. Block 7144.
7144.
Roger. We're going to move down there. Marshall 170, 25 Angels, 10.
Yeah, we won't shoot anymore.
So I think for this one, similar to how the environment was a character in Camilla's piece, I think this one, the radio, like the police scanner, is definitely a character in this, and it doesn't matter who's speaking over it, just that act of knowing that they're talking over a radio and that it's related to like surveillance and potentially violence. is a huge part of the story.
Yeah. So that's kind of going to move us into the final way that we've decided to section this out. And we're going to transition into the non-voice sort of story type tension stuff. And also if there's anybody on their live, like feel free to jump in with questions or comments as you're watching. We'll be happy to respond to them. But we're going to move into this sort of like what we've been calling beyond voice kind of texture and space and rhythm and other elements that can help to, again, build this sort of listening experience where you are hanging on every moment, right? You're not just letting it wash out. You're hanging on every moment. You're listening for tension. You're having moments of release. You're developing characters, perspective, and also, again, I think the big thing in terms of, I don't know, ways to I don't know, I keep using the word toolbox and I hate that word, but I keep using it anyway. But the things to like add to your toolbox is this idea of the sound of reality and that people know what certain sounds are. And you can really use that. This works with music too. Like people know certain songs. If you can just evoke the song without playing it, you can get a similar reaction if you played the song, these kinds of things. So this next one doesn't have any songs in it. So I don't know why I said that right now.
Well, there's chanting.
There is chanting, yeah. Yeah, do you want to?
Yeah, so this is James T Greene, and what's the title for this? Freedom. It was recorded just in the last month. It's really topical, and he's riding on his bike, and I think as you listen, you can tell that he recorded this on an iPhone, and again, like the iPhone becomes an important character in the story. So maybe listening to that as you listen.
I've been really thinking a lot about how blackness and freedom is connected to cycling, that there feels to be some kind of freedom with being able to move at any point and almost have an illusion that you're able to go wherever you want and almost feel free. Like biking feels like a sense of freedom almost in a way. And being on a bike and being at the protest feels like a mixture of both of those things in a way.
Fading out of that one a little bit. It's like 6 minutes long, but
yeah, I think it's a very, I mean, even though it really just is him speaking into his iPhone at the protest and then having the sounds of the protest, it's I mean, I like this part a lot where you hear him.
Justice! Now!
You get a really strong sense of perspective, I think, from that. And it's another thing to be, you can really just, tape can just be kind of a story on its own. I know that's kind of a, I don't know, let your tape be what it is thing. But in some ways, you have to kind of be able to trust that you've recorded something that is compelling. And if it is compelling, you know, it can exist kind of on its own. James also has this is from a podcast video, it's called U+1F60C, which is just a feed. It's kind of a diary feed in a way. And I think it's a really, it's a huge variety of things on there, but I think a lot of it has to do with trusting your tape and trusting mixing, and you yield some really interesting, really beautiful results. And I think a lot of his work kind of sits in the storytelling world a little bit. So you get this natural sort of tension that I think he can build really well. Yeah.
Now we have, should we do Samuel Goff or Lynn Lee, Adriene?
Yeah. So we have two more, and we've hit the hour mark. So we're feeling like it's going long. I think maybe so Samuel Goff has an album called Transmissions. We were going to play the piece Pikeville, which is 8 minutes long. We're not going to play the whole thing. Maybe it would be good to play a few minutes of it. I think this is a good example of how you can take recognizable sounds and sort of work to throw them all together in order to sort of build tension and also build space. It's both musical, but he hasn't distorted the sounds enough to make them not what they are. They're clearly birds. There's clearly a swing or a bicycle or something. You'll hear the sounds of some kind of grainy television voice. And something I mentioned earlier, which is this use of music where you don't necessarily have to play the music or know what the music is to get a sense of what the music means. Well, maybe a couple seconds of it.
Down here, maybe tonight. Yeah, I'll get the people build houses on that land. Get the big bones and how to get it right. You know what I mean? Hey, Grandma,
So I think we can kind of fade out of this one, yeah. So
Similar
it's another...
It's just similar to Soul Racer in the beginning. He is purposefully trying to create, take the listener on a journey and tell a story without lyrics and just like using the sonic textures and all the different sonic textures out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Should I move on to Lynn Lee? I feel like I'm speeding through it, but we could talk over this too. It starts with water. So
Yeah,
this is Lynn Lee right now.
Yeah.
And I guess if people have questions, they could mention those too now. But yeah, this one starts with water, and it's much more like ephemeral and almost like spaceless. It's very like airy. But there is like, it sounds like a human is playing with the water. It's not just a running stream. And then they build in breath and voice into it and choral singing. So that's the breath and the singing. As this goes on, I think I don't know if you can hear this on YouTube, but she's definitely panning certain frequencies in the left ear and certain frequencies in the right ear. And that's kind of like adding a certain tension to it. Even though this is very like airy and light, there is also tension within it. And then there's whispering too.
Again, I think I keep saying this. I don't know why I keep liking to like mention this point, but this use of, in this piece, it's a lot with the water, which can feel like I think there's different interpretations of it. You can feel this, maybe it's an act where someone's washing something, or just playing with the water. And also the sound of birds that you hear in this piece. And I think everything we played had birds in it. The thing is, I think birds and water often can be used to really ground someone in reality. So they know that they're not listening to something that's just a song. They know that they're listening to something that's supposed to be like in a space, right? Or in some kind of real or imagined reality. Just recognizable sounds. How do you use recognizable sounds?
Mm-hmm.
So we do have so there's a question in the comments that says, in your projects, do you have an ideal that you're reaching for? After your perfect story, what will have been achieved? I'm not sure. I think for me, I don't think there is such thing as a perfect story. And it's funny that we're doing this. It's funny that we're doing this talk kind of about stories, because I think most of the conversations that I have when I'm talking to like other radio makers, I feel like Olivia's laughing at me right now, is about how much I'm tired of stories and don't need them and don't care about them. So it's like kind of weird that I'm doing this, that we're doing this whole thing about how stories are existing in different spaces. I think the ideal, what is the ideal you're reaching for? In my own work, I think I'm reaching, I am reaching a little bit for a bit of storytelling and a bit of like an endless time thing, if that makes sense. So I think for me, it has a lot to do with like taking lots of pieces and pushing them together and finding ways of building connections. Sometimes I think about what I do as like one of those, like a detective wall where someone's like drawing crazy lines between everything and then trying to build that out as a narrative. That's my own work. That's not the work we're listening to. I think about audio kind of as a puzzle a lot. I also think a lot about humor in audio, but in these like little ways. I know a lot of these pieces don't really play into that, but yeah. And that's in terms of my own work. I think in terms of what will have been achieved from the perfect story, I think that really varies from piece to piece.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer. I feel like I'm definitely searching for authenticity, but not in like a traditional way. Like I want things to sound different, but I also want it to sound like me. And it's kind of like a balance between those things. I feel like so often with storytelling, we can kind of like get caught in what we think the listener wants to hear. Or like, how do I keep them grounded and hold their hand and make this like sellable, also thinking about profit. And so I definitely think, I definitely try to think about like myself and my own work, and I don't know, just like expressing myself honestly and openly and like tenderly, and how do I get there in like a non-cheesy way.
Yeah, I think also in showcasing these works in terms of this sort of talk, a lot of it to me has to do with building out as much sort of audio language to build up that toolbox, that stupid word that I keep using and hate, to listen to different things in order to like how to really push forward on different genres, on different ways of communicating, on different ways of entertaining, on different ways of emoting, in the same way that any other medium is constantly evolving on itself, in the same way that film has always been evolving on itself, writing, and also being really in tune with the medium itself and trying to like get away from the analogies like the ones I just made.
Mm-hmm. We do have another question too.
So another question is, do you think these approaches are things that will inform production aspects of mainstream storytelling? Do they point in directions that audio might go in? And I think they can, definitely. And I think that hopefully they will. I would think that I don't think that audio is different than any other sort of medium. You know, different elements of it come to play in the mainstream and the avant-garde. They all kind of work together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the goal with this, hoping that they can we can like enhance what we think of with audio. I mean, I think that's important. Adrienne said something just when we were putting this together of how like audio and radio and podcasts, they aren't just writing and they're not like films, but they often get compared to those things. And you have to use the full spectrum of sound, like to your, like kind of harness it. And that's in your power to do as a podcast maker. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think the strange
It's
thing about
happening.
that, it is happening. I really think it is happening. Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to like downgrade what people are doing or say like everyone sucks. You got to get on my wavelength, but it's definitely happening.
Yeah, I think it's also, a big difference maybe between podcasting and those things that they get compared to, like film or writing, is that all of us, if we, grew up in a world where we're watching this YouTube video, all of us kind of inherently know film language because we've watched so many movies in our lives, right? All of us kind of inherently know literary language because it's such an important part of schooling and it's such a just part of your life all the time. I think with a lot of audio language, it doesn't get into the mainstream in a way that saturates the population. It doesn't inherently become part of the way you think. So when you're entering into audio, like audio, not like audio for film or audio, just sound and whatever that means to you, podcasting, radio, whatever, I think you do need to kind of be intentional about what you listen to if you want to be sort of playing with different production aspects or sort of changing how you listen, because it's just not saturated in the culture in the same way.
And then we have another question.
So we have another question, which is, do you think it's possible to make amazing story light pieces with crappy, poorly recorded tape? Asking for a friend. Yes.
Yes, I do. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, yeah. I'm not like, oh, sorry. I've never, I think like, you can do so much with just like an iPhone or like a computer. Like I'm definitely someone who doesn't come from money and doesn't have I don't care to spend my money on super good mics and stuff all the time. So yeah, I think you can do a ton with crappy materials and crappy tape.
Yeah. I mean, one of the pieces we played today was recorded on an iPhone.
Yeah.
Or it sounds like it was. I'm assuming it was.
And part of that's like mixing too, I guess. Like Adrienne was saying, like different things you could do with EQing and reverbing, I guess. Or I don't know. Like there's so much you can play with.
And anybody who's using, even if you're not recording your work, a lot of people we heard a lot of work today that uses a lot of archival footage. And archival footage most of the time isn't great. It's not going to be great audio. You're going to have weird sounds in the background. You're going to have someone handling a mic, and it's not good audio most of the time. So a lot of how you use it, it just comes into sort of like creatively knowing how to speak the sound language, and also sort of learning the tools to do that with. And as far as access to things, recording equipment, I really do think, I agree with Olivia, you can, if you have a phone, you can make really good stuff with just yourself. Or anything. If you have a laptop, you can make really good stuff with just yourself. But as far as mixing goes, there's also, there's a lot of ways to get into mixing without spending a lot of money. Audacity is free, but if you want to go a little bit above that, Reaper is an incredibly, incredibly powerful digital audio workstation that you can get for very cheap. I think the forever license for an individual, I think is $30. It's been a long time since I bought Reaper. It's very, very cheap.
Yeah, I never bought it. I constantly like they say like you can pay for this, and I click X that window out. So
yeah, I mean you can. I know a lot of people do that. It used to be free, also. Yeah, but I mean it's an incredibly powerful way to work on your sound, and it comes with a lot of plugins. So if you are like, oh, well, maybe I need to do something like EQ this, you can, it comes with like a pretty decent set of plugins. Yeah, you can, as someone just mentioned in the comments, you can trial Reaper for a while. You can
Yeah,
trial Reaper forever. and
forever.
yeah. I mean, it's a very good program.
Yeah.
I do a lot of my work on Reaper.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of great tutorials out there on how to use it.
Oh, I'm gonna like cut this out. I don't know what's playing.
Yeah. So I guess the last thing we wanted to do, so we're winding down, is, and feel free if anybody is still watching and has any more questions, like please feel free to ask, or if we didn't answer a question fully, also feel free to ask. The last thing is just to get into listening to new things, especially if you want to bring it into your own production elements, if you want to just listen to different kinds of things. We wanted to offer some resources, places to kind of listen. I think a lot of sort of things that drift into the sound art, creative audio, avant-garde space is weirdly sometimes kind of hard to find. I think, again, this kind of goes back to the comments earlier about how like film is saturated in the society, but this isn't really true of sound. So I'm not sure, maybe we'll send those to Martin and put them in the comments.
Yeah, we use the Radius as a source, Radio Frenia, Radio Network.
Yeah, a good one for archiving is UbuWeb.
UbuWeb, yeah. Constellations and Earlid.
Yep, both really good sources. We also both, have shows on WFMU, so obviously WFMU.
Yeah.
There's also Long Live the New Sound, which is
Adriene's public access style. Anybody can contribute. Anti-podcast.
Yep, and
yeah. And then I think we also just use like a lot of like I said, I'd listen to a lot of music, and my radio show is mostly music, and playing with sound art too, but so I get a lot of inspiration from musicians, and like people we thought of mentioning were like Felicia Atkinson and there's some more, Klein, Pamela Z, these people who are probably more traditional artists or musicians. So yeah, that's just something, an aside.
Yeah. So we'll make sure to get links to everything onto the description so that you don't even have to listen to this. You can just click on everything in the description.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I guess that's it, right?
Thanks very much. That was terrific. Really enjoyed that. Thanks everyone who tuned in. And thanks everyone who's tuned in for all of these live maker streams since we've been doing them since about April, I guess. It's 3 months, wow. So we're going to take a break over the summer. If people would like it, we'll come back in the autumn. And let me know if you've got any questions, people you'd like to see, things you'd like to see. Pod Maker Stream on Twitter and Podcast Maker Weekend on Facebook, and you can find all the details of stuff there. So thanks again to Adriene and Olivia for tonight's talk, and thank you, and have a great summer. Whoa!
Thanks.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'd sort of run out of